Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. Let's start this video from the frontline news. I would say that the news are quite concerning for Ukrainian side because Russians today entered the Sumy region. They intervened from the Kursk Oblast and took around 2 square kilometers of Ukrainian soil. As you see, it is happening very close to the Guivo village, which Ukraine was capable to take under control, and also not far away from Plehova. Now let's zoom out a little to check out the timeline. So it was yesterday and it is today. It was the fast breakthrough of the Russian army, you see. So now they create a threat for the Ukrainian group in the Sumy region, and also now they might bypass the Guivo from this direction from the south, but for that they need to cross this river. That's why maybe they will continue their attack towards Ukraine. Well, if we zoom in closer, so far they've took the part of the forest, so no villages, no roads. Well, I guess they may try to hide their forces because obviously there are some of the trenches. Yeah, it's kind of concerning. Yesterday I've told you about the successful Ukrainian defense in the Kursk region, and today we have not a good news. Sumy became one more oblast in which Russia entered with their forces. Well, for now the Russian group is quite small and we are not speaking about the full-scale intervention to Ukraine for this hour, but still, as we see, Russia is looking for the possible variants for them outside Donetsk, Kherson, Zaporizhia and Luhansk Oblast. Yes, their officials are stating about those 4 oblasts to be connected to Russia, but at the same time they attack different sides. It means that their goal, real goal, is much wider. They really want to occupy all of the Ukraine. And you know guys, also I'm quite concerned about the Dnipro Oblast because it is understandable that Russians will take Pokrovsk, and the distance from Pokrovsk till the Dnipro Oblast is not that long, and actually Russian forces are very close to it, you can see. Let's try to measure. It's roughly 11 kilometers, so really nothing. Plus, you know, this area till Pavlograd has just few of the settlements, so potentially Russians might try to break through fast, taking more ground, especially with the information coming that the Ukrainian defense is not that good on the way. And now there are 3 of the main settlements which are now holding the Russian army. I'm speaking about Kurakhova, Pokrovsk and Velika Novosilka. So if Kurakhova fails, and it will fail, Russians will take this area. If Velika Novosilka fails, Russia will take this area. And Pokrovsk, well, it opens more perspectives for the Russian army. And my prediction that unfortunately Russians will enter this area. And in 2025 we're gonna speak about the battles in Dnipro region. Well, anyways, Russians could be stopped on the front lines if Ukraine gets enough weaponry, but I understand that with the future White House administration that there are not many chances for Ukraine to obtain even that amount of the weaponry that was sent to Ukraine this year, but there are some other tools which might cause Russia to repeat the Soviet Union's history. Well, anyways, for now let's review the front lines because we are here with a map. As you see, Russia creates lots of the pockets. It's their tactics. They create the big ones and the small ones, and for today they moved quite a lot. So it was yesterday. Today you may see that they already expanded this bridgehead a lot, and according to the information we have already, Russians occupied Shevchenko fully. It was the only settlement on the way to Pokrovsk if they take this secondary road. So the battle for the town will start very soon. Also, Russia moved in this area as you saw, and I still wonder why Ukrainian army is located in those villages. As for this hour, the Russian military bloggers say that they advanced towards Spenivka and they encircled the Ukrainian army, but I don't have the confirmation. Well, some of our commanders on the ground are quite honest and they for now dismiss the information coming from the Russian side, but they insist that definitely Ukrainians should be evacuated from those villages. As for Kurakhova, Ukraine withdraws the forces to industrial area mostly, but the battles inside the town continue. In Velika Novosilka, Ukraine was successful near Novy Komar. Yes, there was the counterattack, but at the same time Russia moved on the south. Well, also there is the confirmed information coming that Russia may start definitely their attack towards Zaporizhia. They gather quite a lot of the forces there. I wonder where it could happen, maybe Hulaypole or Orikhiv, but what I know that in this area Ukraine has the defense lines. There was also the report that Russia gathered the forces in Kimbersky Kasa Peninsula, but what they think they can do from this region, I don't know, landing operation using the rubber boats, but this is kind of the big distance here. So Ukraine will spot them and hit with FPV drones whatsoever, so this operation, if they are willing to conduct it, will fail for Russia for sure. Well, some say that they want to take Kherson once again, but Kherson is quite far away from this area where they gathered the forces. My friends, and just in case you want to support the job that I do on YouTube, you may join my Patreon. I'll put the link for my page right in the video description below. Thank you so much for maintaining my motivation. But you know, guys, despite the difficult situation on the front lines for Ukraine, we shouldn't give up, because the real scenario for Russia could be worse than we think. And the Telegraph also supports my ideas about the Russian economy. This article is relative to the events happening in Syria and Ukraine, which are interconnected. Putin's regime may be closer to a Soviet collapse than we think. And they put attention on the Russian interest rate, or the key rate, which was set by the central bank. I know that we discussed this issue before, but Sergei Chemezov, who is the head of the corporation of the Rostec, which produces the weaponry for the Russian army, say that if that continues like this, most of the companies, military companies, will essentially go bankrupt. He said that at rates of more than 20%, and now it's 21%, he doesn't know a single business that can make profit, not even an arms trader. And the prospect for the Russian interest rate is to rise the next year up to 24%. So even the military corporations will fall into the trap. Russia is just now printing rubles. It means at the same time they're trying to keep the artificial ratio with the United States dollars, but they cannot hold it for a long time. They're pushing the spring really hard, but at some point it will just collapse, extend, crushing the Russian economy. I guess I should zoom in the article for you to check everything, and I agree also with this one. So Russia lost roughly 800,000 young and educated men. Not on the battlefields, but those people left the country because of the mobilization which was announced back in 2022. And they're not coming back most, because they do afraid that Putin might send them to the front lines in Ukraine, because he might announce a new mobilization at any point. Well, actually, Putin's order from the previous mobilization wasn't really cancelled. He just went to TV and said, okay, for now we are stopping mobilization, but there was no order to stop it, so officially it still continues. The Russia's digital minister says that the shortage of IT workers is roughly 600,000 personnel. The defense industry has 400,000 unfilled positions. That's why the Russian economy have to print more rubles to pay high salary for those who want to come and, work in the military factories. That's why we also heard the news that Russia hires students to produce Shahid drones. They just don't have enough personnel. Yes, they have a large population compared to Ukraine, but that population is not that effective as Putin thought at first. Antony Kovalov, a head of the Zelenograd Nanotechnology Center, said that industry was crippled by the lack of the equipment that could not replace the foreign supplies. So Russia is still under the sanctions, right? I sometimes complain that those sanctions are not working as they should, but still they are working in many of the sectors of the Russian economy. Yeah, Russia tries to find the ways to export the spare parts which are made in the Western countries via the third countries, but you cannot replace everything with that. And again, there is the shortage of the qualified specialists, because why would they stay in Russia? There is no future there, just the war. And the Russian official export of the oil dropped dramatically, but Russia still has an official ghost tanker fleet, and after all, that's the only thing which keeps the Russian economy running. Yeah, some commenters told me about the Russian National Fund, that they've stored lots of the funds there, but guys, it is draining away. Here are the reserves of that national fund. You see that the reserves in dollars dropped dramatically. So Russia sold out all of the currencies like pounds, euros. What they have now is Chinese yuan and gold. By the way, gold is losing its price now because the markets are feeling more stable. But Chinese yuan is uncomparable with dollars, pounds, and euros. That currency is in lack of stability. It's kind of volatile. So what's the equivalent of the Russian National Fund? Well, roughly 50 billion United States dollars worth for this hour. sorry, for July, so for the summertime. But the military budget for the Russian army for the next year alone is nearly 150 billion United States dollars. So Russia potentially has to spend 3 of the national funds to cover it. But how do they want to cover the cost for the war the next year? Well, as I said to you, they're still selling their gas and oil. So Russia may really follow a Soviet scenario because there is everything combined, you know, incompetent FSB government. There are lots of the conflicts between the Kremlin's elite. Putin is losing its influence in Syria. Ukraine for him is just a black hole for the Russian rubles and everything Russia has. People are running away from Russia without any big war on the Russian territory. Yes, we may speak just about the Kursk, but it's tiny little land compared to Russia. And if somehow the United States of America will start to produce or dig down more oil, selling it abroad, it will just crush the Russian economy. In that case, Russia has very low chances to continue the war in Ukraine and basically to survive as the federation. It will just start to collapse, and I think that the first cracks will happen somewhere in northern Caucasus, Dagestan, Chechnya. And this is the graph for the Russian ruble. It was more or less stable till 2014, but since Russia went under the sanctions, the ruble was dropping down. No, it's not the rise of the ruble, it's the price of the dollar, if you want to buy that for ruble. So now, yes, ruble is 101, like 1 week ago it was 108, so it fluctuates, but the tendency, you can see it clearly on this graph. And from what I see, it will intensify, so I personally expect for the ruble to be around 135, 150 in December 2025, so in 1 year. Alright, and this is Russia. There is the oil refinery which was struck by Ukrainian drones, probably on the territory of the Bryansk region. Kind of the snowy picture, but warm at the same time. And you know what? Ukraine is probably testing some of the new missiles or missile drones, which might hurt Russia a lot, because according to statistics, Russia lost around 35% of all of their oil refinery facilities. Well, actually, this is the Ukrainian missile. It is called Ruta. It was presented recently on one of the exhibitions, and it reminds me really a Tomahawk missile. So missile consists of the several elements. First of all, the warhead, then the fuel tank, then control, so the brain of the missile, and the jet engine, which produces the thrust. So the potential range of this missile could be very long. Well, I wonder if it is really a Ukrainian missile or Tomahawk, but it's very similar. And this is Tomahawk. It has just a little different empennage with 4 of the control surfaces. Well, I just wonder if Ukraine is capable to produce those missiles massively. Emmanuel Macron is going to visit Poland, and the plan is to speak about the security for Ukraine. The idea of the French president is to deploy the common forces of several of the countries to secure Ukrainian front lines, which may only happen after the ceasefire, and I guess that in this case the ceasefire will never happen because Russia will try to avoid this scenario. So Macron thinks that Poland also should be involved into that because it is the direct neighbor of Ukraine. As the Polish source says, they want to deploy roughly 40,000 of the soldiers there, which will continue the peacekeeping mission. So if Russia tries to attack Ukraine once again, they will attack the soldiers of the NATO countries, and they think that Russia will never do it. I also think like that. That is why Russia has the only goal is to continue the war in Ukraine, not letting those forces to be deployed there. Only thing which might force Russia to start negotiations with Ukraine and to ceasefire is the troubles, the big troubles with the Russian economy. So far, Putin still thinks that he may continue this long-term game, so I don't think that he is willing really to stop. A vehicle of the International Atomic Agency was attacked by the drone on their way to inspect the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia. Well, Russians are saying that it was the Ukrainian drone, Ukrainians are saying that it was a Russian one. Clearly a provocation, but luckily everyone survived there, and it looks like there is the bulletproof door here. One more interesting article relative to Ukraine from the Telegraph. They're sure that there is some sort of the relation drop between Washington, so White House, and Zelensky's office. Because basically Zelensky refused to conscript youngsters to Ukrainian army down to 18 years old. As I've told you in my videos before, I do support that move from Zelensky because there should be the future for Ukraine to fight for. I think I should record a separate video about the current state in Ukrainian army, the real losses and so on, that definitely Ukraine may lose the future generations for decades or even hundreds of years ahead. Like, there are not really many people between 18 and 25 years old in Ukraine. Yesterday, the White House spokesman told that if Ukraine lowers the conscription age, United States will give everything needed for them to be equipped on the front lines. But Ukraine doesn't really need that. Ukraine needs the long-range weaponry, missiles, like equipment for the soldiers. Personally, it's not a problem to have armor vests, some of the Kalashnikovs, helmets, but the thing is the air superiority, more artillery shells, more artillery itself, and the long-range missiles, because Ukraine just cannot compete against the Russian midwaves with its own infantry. It will be just the devastation of Ukrainian population, that's it. The only thing how you can hold is to use the advanced weaponry, and under the future White House administration, we don't know what it will be. So in the best case scenario, obviously for Ukraine, the freezing of the conflict is very profitable, but we understand that Russia in the future may attack Ukraine once again without robust security guarantees. So here I would not like to be a manager who is solving this problem for Ukraine, because definitely the situation is very difficult. You have to balance between the future of your country and defending of the country, losing your people who in the future potentially could have built or rebuilt Ukraine. A very, very hard decision for Ukraine in general, but for me, lives are more important after all. And I personally cannot say, hooray, let's go fight, Ukraine is above everything. No, I left Ukraine myself. No, I think that after all, the life is more important. You may dislike me for that, but I think like that. Even though, yes, I support Ukraine and I like Ukraine, but lowering the conscription age will just destroy the country's future, and many people will lose their lives more, with no real result achieved on the front lines. So why does the current White House administration is pushing Ukraine for that move? Honestly, out of clue. But I'm sure that this pressure will be released when Biden leaves office. Alright, the move that will influence the war in Ukraine a lot, and it is done by China. As I told you, also China is the close ally of Russia. They're not helping directly with lethal weaponry, but they provide Russia with other stuff. For example, the drone parts, the equipment for their soldiers, or the golf carts. Famous already. So this time China is cutting off drone supplies critical to Ukraine war effort. The equipment will not be sent to the United States and European companies which work with Ukraine in one or other way. Even batteries will not be supplied. So yes, this stuff will definitely hit Ukraine a lot. There will be the lack of the spare parts for the FPV drones and other drones. Plus, it is happening in the worst time for Ukraine on the front lines. Then Russia has initiative and they have constant supplies from China. And yes, unfortunately, without the China production, it's impossible to get the spare parts. Yes, there are some of the parts which are being produced in the European Union and United States, but it's not enough. And still, there are some of the components which are made in China, so miraculously our Western civilization made China great again, or something like that. Well, all of the production which goes elsewhere, I don't know, this shirt, this microphone, yeah, 100%. Here I can see made in China. Everything is made in China, including computer and camera I'm filming myself. And this iPhone is probably made not in the United States factory, but in China. It was designed in the United States, but produced in the communist state, which is a close ally of Russia, and that's why the Western civilization is unable really to apply the strong sanctions on China, because it's very dependent on it. Capitalism. It's cheaper to produce the goods in China still. So the big corporations want more profit, and that's why they're chasing where they can pay less. As simple as that. But now China is really the threat for the world democracy. Right, the good news announced today, the G7 countries finally agreed to transfer $50 billion to Ukraine to support the military and economy sector. $25 will go from the United States, but all of those funds are the frozen Russian assets in Europe and United States. Awesome. And now, my friends, please don't forget to press your huge like to this video. By doing so, you help me a lot. And as usual, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.